This is Leonard Davis with the Newport Beach Historical Society, and today we are interviewing Peyton Reed, a longtime Newport Beach member. And so, Peyton, I would think at this point you would just be an exhibit in the museum.
That's probably coming at some point. Well, my history started really with my grandparents. Clarence Reed and Nora, his wife, moved to Newport in 1919, and he started a market right on Balboa Boulevard, right by Island Avenue, just kind of around the corner from the library. And in 1924, he built the ice plant on 30th Street. So he ran the ice plant. It was actually like a utility because everybody had to have ice back in those days. And so I was pretty young. He died in 43 or 4, and I was, I was born in August 39. And so I was a little tiny kid, but I do remember him a little bit. I remember the ice plant was very noisy and kind of seemed like dimly lit is my memory. And it was, how would I say that? It was one of my earliest memories, I guess you'd say. And when I was born, my folks lived on West Bay Avenue in those little dinky cottages that were just up West Bay from Island. Mm-hmm. And I guess maybe after I was 2 months old or whatever, they moved to Westminster and Broad Street in Newport Heights. Mm-hmm. So we lived there till I was almost 11. That was a sort of Huckleberry Finn or Tom Sawyer sort of life for a little kid. We had caves and gullies and ponds and trees and fields to play in. And it was really a terrific way to grow up. Just to the, what would it be, east, I guess, of our house, Broad Street ended, and there was a gully between Broad Street, or where it ended, and Santa Ana Avenue. And as a little kid, that gully was a big deal, because it was a gradual slope, and then it went like this, and then in heavy rains there would be a pond there. Mm-hmm. And riding your bike through that was challenging at times. Also, there was a chow dog that lived kind of next door, and he would come out and bark and scare us. Back then we played now and then in the back bay. And the back bay was really wild and woolly. There was nothing going on up there in those days other than the salt mine, which was way up at the other end. But it was full of tramps. And several times we would be chased by the tramps. I think they thought it was funny, probably. But it scared us, of course. Mm. And at one time there was right by the launch ramp now on the dunes, to the left as you go down that ramp, there's a hill. Mm-hmm. That hill in those days was an island. And my friend and I were there one afternoon, and we found a piece of a dock, and we sort of poled our way over to that island. And we went up and climbed up to the top. There was a little shack up there that one of the tramps had made. And we heard him coming home, you might say. And I mean, we were scared out of our wits. So we scrambled down the side of the hill and got on the dock and got out of there. That was, kind of a scary thing for kids. I went to the school on the ocean front for kindergarten, and again in the second half of 5th grade. The other grades were at Corona del Mar School, which opened, I guess, when I was in 1st grade. I think we were the first people there. And in the second half of 5th grade, that was the year we had snow in Newport. Mm-hmm. And the kids they let us out of school and we went out and threw snowballs at each other, which was pretty interesting.
And that was what year? Was that?
That had to be 1950.
1950.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because I was in 5th grade.
How much snow was there?
Not that much, 4 inches maybe.
Wow.
Yeah, we used to have a picture of our house on Westminster with the snow, but I don't know whatever happened to it.
Never heard that before, but
Oh yeah, that was a big deal. During the summer, we went almost exclusively to Montero Street. I don't have any idea why, but we did. That was my dad's favorite. But the lifeguard there was a guy named Don Dickey. So I was typically, say, an average of like 1948, so I was 8. Don had to be 16. He's still alive, by the way. He's a member of Amigos Viejo, and I see him, fairly often when I go to the meetings. And I almost drowned there. I was off away from the main part of the beach by a dock, and I stepped into a hole next to a piling, and that was my first experience with choking. I swallowed a bunch of water, and somehow I flailed around and got up.
did he save you, or?
No, he probably didn't even see me because I just went down and came up. But he was there all the time, and he was a good guy. And I remember the other thing that was interesting to me, as a little kid, the channel there at low tide is only maybe 20 feet wide, in the water. And when it's full, it's probably more like, I don't know, maybe 50 or 60 feet. But my dad used to put us, the kids, on his back. We hold him like this around his neck. And he'd swim us over to the other side. There was a little sand spit there. And, to me, that was the ultimate adventure as a little kid. And for some reason, we very seldom went to the ocean. And I to this day, have no idea why. I've got a picture of me and my brother and sister with my grandmother on the beach down by Island Avenue. And that's the only picture I have of us on the beach. And I was probably 2 years old or something. The other thing that I remember that was unusual is, I didn't do a lot, but we would visit my grandmother on the red car that went down the middle of Balboa Boulevard. That was interesting. Also, my dad, when my grandfather died, my dad took over the ice plant. And when the delivery guys didn't show up, he had to deliver ice. And many times I went with him. And those were interesting times. The trucks had no doors. And they were loud and smelly. It was quite an adventure. He delivered ice, I remember once, clear up into Tustin, in the foothills of Tustin. My grandfather was kind of an inventive guy. He not only ran the ice plant, but he had a foundry in the backside of the ice plant where he did bronze castings and also ceramics. And we used to have a bunch of them. I don't know whatever happened to them, but we got rid of them. The other thing was of my childhood was that visit to the cannery, which I wrote about. And Dad kept his boat at Tommy Thomas's house over in the Findlay district, and of course they were buddies. And I got to go in the cannery when it was an operating cannery with attendant smells and cacophony of all the belts going back and forth. It's pretty interesting. Another thing that was unique, at least for me, in 1947 in the fall, the city of Newport commissioned a Rose Parade float. And there were 4 kids that were selected. I was one of them.
And this was what year?
The float was January 148.
Okay.
It's called the Flight of the Snowbirds. I got a picture of it if you want to see it. Okay, so this is the Flight of the Snowbirds float. It was the first float for Newport in the Rose Parade, and it was January 1, 1948. and it was all I think gardenias. That was back in the day where it had to be flowers. You couldn't use seeds and then leaves and all that stuff. It had to be flowers. So it limited the type of float, but it was really pretty. I remember the aroma was amazing. So that was the float. And then backtracking, this is my grandfather's ice plant in 1924. And he's standing in the doorway up there. And my dad is the second guy from the left. Those are Model T trucks. Anyway, so that was an era of interesting. During grammar school, I started in 4th grade playing saxophone, and so by 5th and 6th and 7th, I was in band, and 7th and 8th, I was first out E-flat alto sax in both, and then in 8th grade, I advanced to what they call swing band. The best of each instrument was in the swing band. And we played big band music for assemblies and assemblies and what's the other? Dances. Duh. That was an interesting experience. It was really fun, and the big band music was fabulous. You know, I still like big band music. I was also on the tumbling team. There were about 6 of us, I guess, on the tumbling team. We also did exhibits for the assemblies. And I ran track, did high jump, broad jump, and 50-yard relay. And that was also fun. I didn't play football. I guess I was too small. And then in 1947, my parents joined the Balboa Bay Club, which at that time was a tetherball pole and a hot dog stand. But our number was R20. And the improvements to the Bay Club came about very rapidly.
Stop for a second. Start looking down your notes a little bit. But
okay.
Try to
enunciate.
He's a tough director.
That's what I tell people when I'm in Germany. Langsam und deutlich, bitte.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing I was going to say about the Bay Club, it became a really fabulous place for kids. They had wonderful activities. The pool was open from 10 till noon, and again 2 till 4. And the kids were in it all the time, and we had swimming races and diving events and all that sort of thing. And I had a lot of ribbons for diving mainly. And then at night they had really wonderful barbecues with storytelling and movies. And the one guy I remember was a guy named Dr. I don't know, I think he was a doctor, but they call him Dr. Garish. And he was an older guy, but he was very articulate, and he added a lot of color, let's say, to the storytelling, you know, around the campfire. It was really wonderful. And so the Bay Club was really a big part of my life all through that period I was still working out there when I was in high school and even after that. The big change for me came when we moved to Lido Isle, and that was in the summer of 1950, right before I turned 11. Totally different from living on the Heights. We could walk to the beach. We lived on Ithaca and what then was called Centro. Now it's called Via Lido or something. They changed the name. But in any case, it was only maybe, 500 feet to the water either side. So we were at the beach all the time, either there or at the clubhouse, the Lido clubhouse. And by the summer of '51, I had learned to sail, and Dad had bought us a sailboat, a snowbird, and so we fixed it up, and I sailed it in this flight of the snowbirds in '51. In '52, I borrowed Kent Edler's boat. He was a guy that lived down the street, and he had a better boat. So I got 40th out of almost 500 boats in that race. Also competed in they had reciprocal races with Balboa Yacht Club and Newport Yacht Club. And then one of the favorite memories I have is of tacking down the North Lido Channel, lying on the windward deck, steering with my feet with the sheet in my right hand, and it was like perfect weather, and that was a fun time, and the boats would go by and the people would yell and wave and all. It was really pretty funny. The Lido clubhouse at that time was, we spent a lot of time down there, and the clubhouse was one big room, and it probably had a ceiling height of about close to 20 feet, had French doors that went out to a terrace overlooking the bay, and it had a tower. It looked like a little bit like the Palazzo Vecchio. I think that's where they took the design. And so we spent a lot of time there. They had a pool table, but you couldn't play pool till you were 12. So naturally, I had a year of agony not being able to play pool. But it was a great place. We spent a lot of time there. And during the Korean War, I would go down there after school a lot of times and help them spot airplanes, because I had read up a lot on airplanes, and I ended up knowing more than the people who were spotting. That was an interesting experience also. One of the things we did that was really a lot of fun is we would play ball tag, where you would play, you run around, or not run, swim around under the docks and the boats, and your boundaries were on either side of the Lido Club. And sometimes those would go for 2 hours before you finished. It was really a lot of fun. The bad thing that happened to me is the first day out of 8th grade, I went down to the Lido Club, and it was low tide, and I ran down the beach and did this big arching dive, which I certainly should have known better, and I broke my left elbow, and that kind of put the kibosh on me for a while. Although they didn't put a cast on it. It was just a wrap, because they took out the piece that broke. So that was kind of slowed me down for summer. In 1953, after the 2 years of sailing, I got interested in racing outboard hydroplanes. And so for the next 3 years, I was consumed with boat racing. And that was really a lot of fun, very exciting, much more exciting than sailing. And we raced in Marine Stadium, Mission Bay, Cachuma Lake, Brawley, Puddingstone Dam, Hanson Dam, Lake Los Angeles, which is now Marina del Rey. And the races there were televised in 1955, probably must have been in the fall, maybe early winter. That was pretty neat. In high school, I was on the swim team. I had thought I was going to play football and track, but my broken arm kind of slowed me down. So I got on the swim team, and that ended up being a good experience. Coach Irwin was my coach during the first 3 years, and then Coach Newland took over for the senior year and implemented a much more rigorous workout schedule. That kind of led to the lifeguard experience. When I graduated in '57, 3 of my friends all went to the prom together. and the lifeguard test was the following morning. So we went to our prom and did all of that, and then, don't ask me why, but we drove to Palm Springs, stayed up all night, drove back, and we're on the beach at 8 o'clock right by the Balboa Pier for the lifeguard test. And we were looking around at all the other guys, and they seemed to be bigger and older, and we thought, boy, we're toast. So we get in the water, and we ended up getting first, second, third, and fourth in the lifeguard test. Which is pretty funny. So lifeguarding became kind of a big deal for me the next 12 years. And I ended up my last 3 years as a lieutenant in charge of what they called Division II, which was the wedge to the Newport Pier. Some of the interesting things during that period, Don Burns was a coach at Harbor High School. He was also a lifeguard during the summer. And in the summer of '59, there was a turnover in the lifeguard department, and they had a new guy there, and he, for some reason, didn't like Don Burns. So he put Burns in a tower. Well, the tower was 15th Street. I was at 17th Street. Burns was a good sport, so he, went along with it. Now, in those days, well, lifeguards still do. They pretty much all wear fins. But normally you put your fins on when you get into the surf. Don would put his fins on when he got to the bottom of his tower. So he would run down the beach with his fins on. They were the Owen Churchill. They're kind of a short, stubby fin. Fins I had were that long, and U.S. divers, totally different. But Don would run down the beach with these fins on, and it was hilarious to watch him. And so we had numerous rescues together where he jumped in the water with me. It's pretty funny, actually, watching him. Another highlight was in 1963, we had huge surf for about 10 days. And that's what eroded the beach in West Newport. I don't know if any of you guys remember, but the beach went from being probably at least 200 feet to the berm down to where you couldn't drive a Jeep in front of the walls. So it lost, 190 some feet or something like that. And then they did the sand haul and the groins and all that. During that time, I went out on a rescue. This was in September, and it was after, the crowds, but there were still people on the beach. So there was this guy struggling in a riptide off of 15th Street. I jumped in, dove under the first couple of waves, and I felt this big tug on my buoy. And anyway, I came up and I swam over to the guy, and I reached back to pull my buoy forward, snap him in, and there was no buoy. The force of the wave had severed rubber about that thick, and I ended up with this little piece of a rubber a buoy. That would give you some idea of the power of the wave. It was immense. Anyway, I got the victim to the Sea Watch and radioed in and said, you need to close the beach because we can't guarantee anybody's safety. And that was pretty interesting. During that same period, the longest rescue I ever had, I left the beach at about 17th Street, contacted the victim out by the end of the Newport Pier, past the end of it, and finally got him back to the beach over by Blackie's at like 23rd Street. That was the longest. Lifeguarding actually ended up being an opportunity for me, because when I got out of college, I had graduated with a degree in art history. And as you might guess, there was very little demand for art historians in Newport in 1961. So I was able to guard in the summer and sometimes spring and fall, and then go on trips. And so I went to the Caribbean once, with Logan Lockerbie and a couple other guys, and then I made 3 trips to Europe. And I guess I should ask at this point, are you interested in the experiences in Europe, or should I keep it just
Well, I
to
think
whatever?
we want to kind of limit it to Newport Beach
Okay.
history. So,
So anyway, that was an interesting arrangement.
where did you go to college?
SE,
Oh, I see. Okay.
yeah. So what happened after that? After I left the lifeguard department, that was in February of '69. I left the lifeguard department, and I was sort of cut loose. Long and short of it is, for various reasons, I landed a job with a large land development company in Riverside called Rancho California. And that launched me into a career in real estate market research, which has lasted till now. Still doing it, although I'm way less involvement.
Did you remain living in Newport all those years?
Yes, when I wasn't traveling. Another experience which was, I think, kind of unique. My first summer after graduating, 3 friends and I rented a house at the end of 16th Street in Newport, which at that time there was nothing around that house for probably half a mile probably. And the guys living there, some of you may know a guy named Muck, also known as Don McCallum, Jay Carlisle, and Hugh Kelly. These guys were the ones that eventually bought the land in Tahiti and built the Valley High Resort. And they were some very colorful individuals indeed. And so when they moved out, we had partied with them my senior year on weekends. We would come home and party with they called themselves the Airmen, because Muck had been in the Air Force, and he called everybody airmen, and where they lived was the airdrome. And anybody that remembers that era or knows Muck, they know what I'm talking about. It was a summer of great chaos and a lot of women, a lot of beer, but it was really a fun summer, and attest to that. Then in 1974, I bought a Lyman, which is a wood lapstrake hull boat, mainly built for bays and rivers and lakes. Bought it from a guy named Ken Hartman. His dad bought it from Yasha Heifetz, and Heifetz bought it from the factory in Sandusky, Ohio in 1948. And so I bought it and refinished it once in 1976 and again in 1993. And I had it in the Wooden Boat Show in '94. And it was, the boat was really cherry. It was beautiful. One of the interesting things was, being a wooden boat, it has to come out every year, typically does, for a bottom job and usually other repairs. During one of those events, 1980, I had it out, and I took it out always at Hans Dickman Boatworks, which is right at the end of 30th Street. And there was, at that time, the owner, Hans Dickman, was there. Well, Hans was at least 90 years old. I forget, I think he was 90 or 92, something like that. He was on his back, caulking the seams of a sailboat, pretty large sailboat, with a mallet. So here's this guy, 90 years old, caulking the seams. And I got to talking with him, and he informed me that when he was still living in Germany as a young man, he was involved with the several shipwrights who built a special launch for Kaiser Wilhelm II. So he was a very colorful guy, this Hans Dickman. And I'm not sure I don't know when he died, but he was a pretty vigorous guy at 90, I can tell you that. So in 1971, or by 1971, I was living in the Bluffs, and that was a beautiful community that I had hoped to live in the rest of my life. And I lived in several different homes. The last one was what they call an E-plan on the big green belt, which was full of big trees and flowers, and it was beautiful. That last house, though, we remodeled, and we were going to stay there forever, but the flights went from something like 40 a day up to 90 some a day, and I couldn't take the noise anymore, so we moved to Irvine. First moved to Turtle Rock, and then after that we moved down here.
And that was what year?
1990. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got the highest price ever for a non-view E-plan. So we moved to Irvine, and we're now living in a place that is sort of a smaller version of the Bluffs. We've got a great big green belt out there behind the house with huge trees and shrubbery that blossoms, and rabbits.
All developed by the Irvine Company, all of his developments, right?
Yeah, well, the builder was Standard Pacific, and they were built in 73 and 74. They sold like hotcakes. So we've been here ever since, and my heart is still in Newport in a lot of ways, although I've never been sorry about moving here. I don't miss the Jets. And so we go down to Newport at least a couple times a month. We have breakfast a lot of times at Wilma's and walk around the island. Also take the ferry over to Harborside or Newport Landing. So we're still connected. And but that's kind of my story. It's been really a good life. I've had a lot of fun, a lot of great experiences, met a lot of really wonderful people in the real estate industry. It's nice that the people I deal with are very smart. Most of them have an enormous net worth, probably of, I don't know, 10 to 20 or 100 million or whatever. I know some guys that are just hugely wealthy. Very articulate, very smart, and very, very nice to work with. So that's been a really good experience.
Have you been involved with any civic issues or politics or anything like that?
Not really. The only thing I guess you'd say is I joined the airport working group when I was in the Bluffs in '87, I guess it was. And I kind of got the impression that I knew that the airport was going to get worse. Mm-hmm. And I got a hold of the mandated airport alternative report, which was an inch thick worth of BS. And I told my wife at the time, I said, this is going to get worse before it gets better. And there's probably no chance that it's going to get better. And better may be that they bulldoze it just like they did at Playa del Rey. Mm-hmm. And that's when we moved. Mm-hmm. I said, we got to get out of here.
You don't have any of that problem living here then?
No, here's quiet. Yeah, it's really nice.
Well, do you have any last things to say?
Only that growing up in Newport was a fabulous experience. Like I say, it was Tom Sawyer my first 10 years, and a lot of boating and surfing and all of that. One thing that I probably should mention maybe was interesting. I was very good at body surfing, and I guess for whatever reason I just never got into board surfing. But this article, or an article here in Surfer Magazine, this was...
Is that you?
No. This was written about what they called, what is it on here someplace? Pipeline comes to Newport. This was from that 1966. We had huge surf again. Mm-hmm. And here it is. Here's the article. There's the article. Part of it, at least. Huge surf. And there's several pages of it. This page here, where is it anyway? Right here. That's my younger brother. And right underneath him is me. I'm the only body surfer. Everybody else is on a board. I think there's maybe one belly boarder. But that's about a 15-foot wave, and it was really fabulous surf. And so that article was really pretty interesting. That was an interesting experience.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
You bet.
Peyton, this has been an enjoyable interview for me just because I remember some of those days back then too. Doing
Were you in the water?
Some of the things you did. And that concludes our interview with Peyton Reed, who is a member of the Newport Beach Historical Society, and he has more history in his head than anybody I've met yet.
Board member.
Yeah, a board member, yeah. Anyway, so thank you very much, sir.
Absolutely, my pleasure.